Hey Moneymakers, welcome back to another episode of Taking Stock Live. I'm your host, Kalila Enriquez Reynolds. And guess what? I'm back in Jamaica, back on the Taking Stock set. And I actually forgot my camera charger for the big camera. So we're on the small camera tonight. Doesn't look bad. Have this reflection going on over here, but we're going to work with it tonight because it's good to be back in studio on this election eve in Jamaica. So we have a lot to talk about as we make our preparations to head to the polls tomorrow. We also know Guyana had their elections yesterday, and their results are expected on Monday. And then later on, we're also going to be looking at two of Trinidad and Tobago's largest companies. What's up with them? But tonight it is your election recap. If you're still undecided, as I know a lot of people are, we're going to be looking at some of the policies and some of the possible implications of the policies and promises of the two major political parties here in Jamaica. But first, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and tell a friend that Taking Stock is live. And also, let me know in the comments what part of Jamaica or what part of the world you are joining us from. Now, come on, let's get this money. On this episode of Taking Stock, there's less than 24 hours before Jamaicans head to the polls for the country's general election. We'll discuss the major plans from both parties and the potential impact on you and your money. Plus, the analysts weigh in on the latest market developments. How have Trinidad's Agostini and Angostura been performing? We'll discuss.
But first, here's What's Hot, brought to you by JMMB Group, your best interest at heart.
The Amber Group has partnered with Nationwide News to launch digital TV channel Revo TV. According to the company, Revo TV will be a 24/7 AI-powered digital channel delivering non-stop news, business, sports, and entertainment. The channel is scheduled to go live on September 3 with live coverage of Jamaica's general elections. Amber says it will also be launching RevoNews.ai, an online news platform. Audiences will be able to talk directly to their news through an AI-powered assistant, explore archives in seconds, and curate the stories, sports, and entertainment. Island Grill CEO Tanya Waldron-Gooden says the company has solidified plans to expand regionally. The announcement follows the opening of their 18th location in Jamaica. The new store was built for $1.6 million. Waldron-Gooden says the company is set to undertake an aggressive growth expansion and will rapidly increase its number of stores across the island. She said the long-term plan is to transition Island Grill into a multi-concept restaurant operations company similar to Express Catering, which operates several brands. The Guyana Elections Commission says the winner of the country's general election will be announced on Thursday, September 4. Guyana's general election was held on Monday, September 1. According to the commission, once they have confirmed the winners of individual seats, a president can be declared. The results of Guyana's 2020 election took 5 months to finalize. However, the commission said Monday's election was smooth, with some 2,000 police officers, 500 local observers, and 200 international observers keeping the peace. The United States has reignited its trade dispute with the European Union after President Donald Trump threatened new tariffs. The threat is a response to the EU's digital services taxes and technology regulations. Trump accused the bloc of unfairly targeting U.S. tech giants such as Google and Amazon. He warned that countries imposing levies and rules would face substantial additional tariffs and export restrictions on crucial advanced American technologies such as chips. Some EU states have imposed digital services taxes on revenues from tech companies that use online advertising and monetize user data.
What's Hot was brought to you by JMMB Group, your best interest at heart.
Caribbean people, do you often feel left out of the money conversation because all the books and courses are tailored for the bigger countries? That's why I created the Money Mission Workbook. It's for us Caribbean people who want to grow our wealth and achieve financial freedom. I'll walk you through creating your financial plan, taking control of your debt, and investing in our economies. Head on over to Amazon.com to buy now. The link is in my bio. Welcome back. Let me see who's joining us. I keep having to remember to look into the small camera, not the big camera, because big camera is not working, just habits. So sorry if it seemed like I was looking over you earlier. So let's see who we have. Warrell is saying good night all the way from Montego Bay. Davian saying good night. Dwight says, may the best party win. Davian is representing Montego Bay. Marva says, good evening. Raquel is checking in from Kingston. We've got the diplomat in ATL. You didn't fly in for the election, diplomat. I hear the planes were full. Raquel says, is reminding everybody as usual to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you to our like police, Raquel Francis. The Epiphany saying good evening from Washington, D.C. Jackie is hailing from Kingston 7. Orlando is in Grange Hill. We've got Garfield in Spanish Town and Orville also in Spanish Town. Kish saying good night to the money makers. So yes, it is election eve and the excitement is in the air here in Jamaica. Funny enough, I was on the road most of the day today and the roads were pretty quiet because, you know, they do have that rule of no campaigning within 24 hours before the election. So traffic was pretty smooth today. I don't know what it's going to be like on the roads tomorrow. Tonight, I have no guest for you in this first section. We're just going to be reviewing some of the major policies and campaign promises that were made. And I want to hear your feedback. So we have an open conversation between me and you in the chat. And I want to hear what you think about these major economic policies. Are they doable? Are they practical? Is it something that could or would or will sway your vote on election day tomorrow? So both the PNP and the JLP have made some interesting proposals from an economic standpoint, and I want to go over just a few of them tonight, starting with the most recent campaign promise coming from Team JLP. And that most recent promise, as you may have heard, is they're going to double the minimum wage. It's currently at 16,000 Jamaican dollars per week. They are planning to double it to 32,000 over the next 5 years. Let's play the clip.
The livable wage, simply, is what the average person needs to survive for rent, utilities, education, food, and emergencies. So, over the next few years, in our third term, we will double the minimum wage from $16,000, what we have carried it to now, having almost tripled it, to $32,000.
So that plan is to double, or that announcement is to double the minimum wage. Bearing in mind that the JLP has increased the minimum wage several times over its past 10 years in office. I believe when they came in, it was at about $6,200 and it's now $16,000. And I remember having this conversation several times when these announcements have been made, saying that it is not practical, people are going to get laid off. And I remember when I was at NNN, we had this debate on the air as well about the livable wage and whether it is something that employers would be able to afford. And there was a lot of skepticism at the time, including coming from myself. And right now I'm here thinking, gosh, because at the time I was on the side of the employees. Now I'm over on the other side as an employer, and I'm thinking 32,000. Okay, I've always prided myself on paying my staff well above minimum wage, but moving to 32,000, for some people on the team, not the main team, but there are some freelance people who work with me that 32,000 is going to be out of budget. And so I have to think as an employer now and think, okay, how can we make this work? So from the employer standpoint, and I hear what PSOJ is saying and what the JMEA is saying and the Employers Federation are saying, but at the same time, I also remember these same conversations being had and all of these organizations raising the very same concerns, saying, well, it's not practical, it's not feasible. And when you think about who earns minimum wage and who pays minimum wage, because a lot of people such as helpers and gardeners, security officers, those are the ones who are earning minimum wage. Now, if you as a household, as an individual, employ a household helper, and your household helper is currently employed at 16, let's say in the range between $16,000 and $20,000 a week, and now they're telling you you need to double that to at least 32,000, even though it's going to be phased in over time, that might end up being burdensome on those people who have to pay these wages. And so will it mean that there is going to be less employment? It's a legitimate question. However, based on the track record, unemployment has actually gone down, even though the minimum wage has gone up. But let me see if any of you have any comments so far on this particular issue. I want to know, what do you think about doubling the minimum wage? Is this a feasible policy change by the JLP? Do you trust them to implement it? Would it lead to unemployment? Let me see what you guys are saying. So 0 Day says, I'm voting from Canada. How do you vote from Canada, 0 Day? Are you coming? Did you fly in? How does that work? Diplomat says we need mail-in voting. I disagree. If you want to vote, come to Jamaica. Come and cast your vote in person here and see what the experiences, the lived experiences on the ground are in the constituency in which you are voting. Yamfoot says, greetings from Grenada. Epiphany says, 150% agree. I'm very disappointed about still not being able to vote from overseas. Orville says, desperation, I tell you. So, you know, minimum wage is one of those issues that always comes into play right around election time, because politicians want to pander to the voters, to the people who are likely to come out to vote, and the people who are going to say, well, what's in it for me directly? So they've already pandered to the middle class by saying that, well, we're going to raise the income tax threshold, that's the PNP's promise, to $3.5 million. Now the JLP is countering that by pandering to the lower class and saying, well, okay, rich people going to take the 3.5 or the reduction in income tax to one, how much is it? I don't even remember now. I'm going to go over that shortly. And no, lower class people, here's something for you. We're going to double the minimum wage. So let's see what else you guys are saying. Clayton says, when JLP says no new tax, food price go up. The Diplomat says some of the PNP's proposals are very unattainable, and the minimum wage proposal might seem unattainable, but I see he has done the increases successfully before. And then Diplomat again says the epiphany effect, we need to become more technologically advanced. We need more services to be online. All right, the next thing that we are going to discuss is the income tax promises. And my system just logged me out here. So let me just quickly log back in so we can bring up the clips. Because income tax has been one of those major campaign issues. And the irony is not lost on me that in the 2016 general election, the JLP's campaign promise to raise the income tax threshold to $1.5 million, I believe was a major factor in them winning that election. 1.5 was a huge campaign promise, and they were able to deliver on that campaign promise. And so the irony now is that PNP, who back then said it couldn't be done, is now saying, all right, I see your 1.5. Let's more than double that, 3.5. Let's make it 3.5. But let's go to the clips. So the discussion about the party's income tax promises have gotten the most attention over the past few weeks. PNP says raise the income tax threshold to 3.5 million. And this was one of the hot topics between Mark Golding and Julian Robinson during the election debates.
Mr. Golding, Keith Duncan says the PNP's proposal to increase the income tax threshold to 3.5 million is impractical and impossible to fund without new taxes. Can you explain how these planned tax breaks will work without hurting the economy?
The context in which we have decided to increase the threshold to 3.5 million is the hollowing out of the middle class in this country. Working families finding it extremely difficult to make ends meet. And we believe with the debt to GDP ratio having now, after 13 and a half years of belt tightening and austerity, having now reached the cusp of the target of 60% of GDP introduced into the fiscal rules in law under Portia Simpson Miller, this is a time, this year it's expected to actually, with the readjustment of the definition and calculation of GDP, this is the year that we expect to achieve that target. That will release 2.5% to 3% of GDP of additional resources, which were not previously budgeted for in the fiscal policy paper. That is more than sufficient to pay for our entire program, including the $3.5 million increase to 3.5 million of the tax threshold, which will make our civil servants and our middle managers, and indeed most of Jamaicans who are presently suffering under the high burden of the cost of living, have money that they can spend.
So that's Mark Golding, opposition leader, and Julian Robinson, opposition spokesman on finance, also addressed the issue in the finance debate, the debate on the economy.
PNP has promised to move the income tax threshold to $3.5 million starting April 2026 without any new taxes. How much will it cost? Is the timeline realistic? And which programs will be adjusted to accommodate the increase?
Thank you for that question, Andrew. We are committed to implementing the 3.5 threshold starting April 2026. This will be funded from revenue growth, which currently, based on the 1% growth, is projected to generate an additional revenue of $140 billion over a 3-year period. Additionally, we expect within the envelope that exists in the budget has 4 main components. You have debt servicing, you have salaries and wages, you have the capital budget, and then you have the programmatic budget. As a political party, we would have our own priorities, and we will look at the programmatic budget and make adjustments there. But we will begin implementing the 3.5 million threshold April 2026. However, there are other programs that we have announced that once we assume office, we will immediately, within the envelope that exists for programs, see how we will implement them. For example, ensuring that every needy child gets a hot meal per day, the first in family who goes to university to have a full scholarship, and also the $500,000 grant, which will be given to young first-time owners. So we are going to ensure that we do this in a responsible way fiscally without affecting the budget.
Thank you, Team PNP. Thank you, Team JLP. A rebuttal.
Lies, lies, lies. It cannot be done without imposing new taxes on the backs of Jamaicans. Your 3.5 is the biggest political scam.
That's Favour Williams, Finance Minister, responding to Julian Robinson during the debate on the economy last week. I think that was on Thursday. You know, it's like I said, it's very interesting that the PNP has now come out swinging with this particular campaign promise, which was basically improving upon the JLP's campaign promise that won them the election in 2016. And in this particular election, where the margins are so close according to the polls, it could possibly make the difference. Now, will that make a bigger difference, or will the JLP's promise to double the minimum wage make a bigger difference? How many people are in both categories? How many people are going to be directly impacted by both set of promises? And how many of those people are actually going to come out to vote? Now, can it be done? Well, in 2016, I was very skeptical that the income tax threshold could be doubled to 1.5, but it was done. And the funny thing about the PNP's argument now in how they say that they're going to fund this increase to 3.5 is that they're basically saying the economy has improved so much, debt to GDP is down so much that we now have the room to do it. And I feel like the JLP lost a crucial opportunity to rebut that by saying that, well, if you're going to get the money because of the improvements in the economy, we did that. We're the ones who are making your plan possible. I feel like they didn't adequately capture that during the debate. The point has been made subsequently, but they missed that golden opportunity. Because normally during an election time or an election year, you would hear politicians saying the other side, especially the opposition is going to say, this government has wrecked the economy. The PNP in this instance is saying, this government has done so well for the economy that we are now able to increase the income tax threshold if we are elected to office. I feel like that is a really key point that maybe has not been emphasized enough. And I think that argument from the PNP actually works in the JLP's favor. So let's take some comments before we move on to the JLP's promise as it relates to income tax. 0 Day says the key to remember is that this increase will be gradual, which we also have to take into consideration the growth of the economy over time. Raquel reminding you to like and comment. Orin says, with all that's going on in St. Anne and how don't you look like foreign, I will do the right thing, September 3. Christopher says the PNP announced plans to increase the tax-free threshold from 1.8 to 3.5 million effective April 2026. And there was little to no concern from JMA and these other bodies. So actually, they did not say that it's going to go straight to 3.5 April 2026. They did say that it's going to be a phased approach. So I don't know what's going to be phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and over how long do they intend for it to get to 3.5. But I do not believe that what they have said is that it would be implemented. 3.5 would be implemented April 2026. It was going to be, the intention is for it to be a phased approach. And also to mention, the JLP has already announced plans, even before in the previous budget presentation, to raise the income tax threshold again. Next year, it's going to 1.9 million, and the following year, it's going to 2 million. 0 Day says, remember the minimum wage was 6,000 and now it's 16,000. Did we lose any business because of this? Exactly the point I was making before. It was said that it's going to cause mass unemployment, and instead, the opposite has happened. There has been record low unemployment. Dee says, I think this increase in the minimum wage will allow those earners to offer their services to more people with a more sophisticated labor contract rather than work full-time for one person for less money. Christopher says, the JLP announced doubling the minimum wage over time, 3 years, and the sky is falling. Over 5 years, they said it would be, no? Over 5 years, over the course of their next term, which is 5 years. Ayrton Sounds, for those who earn above minimum wage, does the increase benefit them as well? Does this mean employers will increase salary? I think it likely will, because if the minimum wage is now 16,000, and let's say you earn 20,000, and there are tiers within the pay scale of an organization. If your lowest tier is 16,000 and that's going up to 32,000, then the person who was at 20 is going to have to go up as well so that they're not at the lowest tier. I believe that's how it is going to work. Anyway, because you can't have the minimum wage earner earning more than somebody who is senior to them, or the same thing as somebody that is senior to them. So what it would do is push up all the salary scales indeed. Jonathan says, I believe that increasing the minimum wage to 32,000 will help workers afford basic necessities like rent and food. However, for this to be effective, the government should provide a tax break. The next thing that we haven't fully discussed is the impact of this minimum wage increase on inflation. So with more people spending, there is going to be more demand for goods, and that increased demand may very likely have an impact on inflation, meaning the price of goods and services are going to go up. We saw what happened when teachers in the public sector got a raise last year. It meant that, well, teachers in the private sector, prep school teachers, also had to get a raise, which meant that those school fees in many instances were doubled. So there are additional impacts, additional effects of raising the wages for those low-income earners. Humble Boss says by 2030 it will be feasible because they're going to increase it in stages. Orville says no matter how you spin it, desperation. The Diplomat says PNP planning their budget on the successful economy of the JLP, and they're saying people are suffering and the economy is bad. Both can't be true simultaneously. That's exactly the point I was making. It's a very interesting argument to say that we're going to do all this stuff because the economy is great, but the economy is not great because you guys wrecked the economy. You're not doing a good job. But because you've done a good job, we can implement these policies that we promised. Oren says it's an employee's market. Jobs are becoming available daily. And for those who don't want to pay good wages, they will have to run less hours. People now have options. It's a good look, Jamaica. Love it. All right, I'm going to save some more of the comments for the next point. This is Julian Robinson again, because he was asked a follow-up question about what programs the government plans to cut.
14 PMP, I did not hear the cost of the proposed increase in the threshold, nor the programs to be readjusted to accommodate the increase.
The cost of the increase in the threshold would be $55 billion. Now, no political party implements every single thing in 1 year. So we are going to ensure that the implementation is done, which protects the fiscal sacrifices that have been made, and will ensure that the adjustments are consistent with the budget. So it's $55 billion that this particular program will cost. And in terms of the readjustment of programs, that is something that we will do once we get into office. When we look, we have priorities which are different from the current government's priorities. And we will make those adjustments within the envelope of $360 billion, which currently exists for programs in the
Thank you, Team.
So PNP saying that they're not going to cut basically any programs because the money is there to do it. And let me also say this, for those of you who've been following me long enough, you know that I'm an advocate of the complete abolition of income tax. So raising the threshold to 3.5 is something I do think is doable and I think should be done, but I think it should go even further and income tax should be abolished entirely, especially at the level of 3.5. If you leave it at 3.5, then there's only a handful of people who are still paying income tax. So why are we going to burden just this very small group of people with income tax when everybody else is paying no income tax? To me, that is unfair for people in that particular tax bracket. Middle income people and some of the higher income as well. Let's take some more. Oh no, I wanted to come to the JLP's clip. So there was some back and forth over the JLP's plan. So the JLP has taken a different approach this time around. Before, their approach has been in gradually raising the income tax threshold. And now that they've gotten it to a certain point and they plan to take it to 2 million, now what they want to do is focus on bringing down the rate of personal income tax that you will be paying. So currently you pay 25% income tax on all your earnings above $1.8 million. The JLP says that if they are elected, they are going to reduce that rate to 15%. And there was some back and forth over that point during the debates. We have the clip. Oh, we don't have the clip. All right. Unfortunately, we don't have that clip, but that was Finance Minister Favour Williams making that point during the debate last week. And she said it was going to cost about $20 to $30 million to implement. Later at a press conference, she revised that to, I think, 38 million to 44 million. And the PMP said it's going to cost a lot more than that. But I did do a piece analyzing the cost of both parties' income tax plans, income tax objectives, and how much it's going to cost, whether it is feasible. And I'd encourage you to take a look at that. In the meantime, let me take some more of your comments. Let me see what you guys are saying about it. But I lost my place. I have to find back where I was. And I also have to screen some of these comments because some of you are saying some things in the comments that I cannot repeat on air. All right, 0 Day says, first they complain to them now feel the growth in the economy for the normal man. Now the threshold and minimum wage increase, it's still a problem. Oren says, Cal, what is a programmatic budget? What kind of funds are allocated there? Is the funds there to play with? Won't programs become displaced? Remember, our government has control over whatever projects they want to fund, over how they intend to allocate funds. That's why it's called the consolidated fund. The budget, the money to run the country all goes into what they call the consolidated fund. It's one place, it's one account that you draw from and you decide where you're going to allocate certain things. Different governments have different priorities. That's why you see in the US, for example, President Trump has come in, the Republican Party have come into power, and they've decided that they're going to cut certain programs because those are not their priorities. And the PNP has the same prerogative if they are to come into office as well. They may say, we don't really see the need to spend here. We prefer to spend over here because this is more aligned with our philosophy as a political party. D says, I noticed that too and really didn't stick it to them with that. The same point I was making earlier. Oren. Oh, gosh. Employment only increases in BPOs. D says the person making 20K pay would have to go up. Exactly what I was saying. So all salary scales would also have to increase. Shell says PNP can't even run them house, let alone an entire country. But I also don't like any one party to be in power for more than 10 consecutive years. Jamaicans better not repeat an 18 years thing. And I think that is going to be a major sticking point for a lot of Jamaicans because of that legacy of the 18 years. A lot of people are wary of giving any political party 3 consecutive terms. So there may be people out there who think the JLP has done a great job, but they do not want to give any party a 3rd term. And understandably so. What we have seen in the past is that when parties get too much time in power, that's when the corruption really starts. Let me not say starts getting bad, because there's almost always going to be corruption at some level in politics. But when it really starts getting ugly is when these parties get too much time in power. And I think that is going to play a major role in what Jamaicans are feeling when they go to the polls tomorrow, perhaps even more so than the individual promises made by the parties. So one, you have to weigh, do I trust this government to remain in power? Or no, do I not trust any politicians to be in power for that long? Because should they get a 3rd term, this is going to be 15 years of the JLP. Do you trust these people for 15 years of running the country? It's coming pretty close to that 18-year reign by the PNP. Oren says, I feel it's kind of high, but okay, this is not on the election. Lanesra says, if you look at adding 3,500 onto minimum wages per year, it looks feasible and will work out to double in the next 5 years. But the thing is, it's not 3,500 a month, it's 3,500 a week. So 3,500 a week is times that by 4 is 14,000 extra a month per employee if you have multiple employees. So I don't know. That's a tricky one. NutriFit says the economy cannot be great at 1% per annum. What type of stupidity is that? And funny enough, if I was to have been able to make it to the debates this year, I would have re-asked my same question that I asked at the last debate, which was in 2020. What happened to 5 and 4? Remember that campaign promise? It wasn't a campaign promise. It was after. It was the Economic Growth Council led by Michael Lee Chin. There was this huge press conference and lots of glitz and glamour promising 5 and 4, 5% economic growth within 4 years. It's been 10 years and we haven't come anywhere close to 5% economic growth. Although I feel like, and I've been feeling this way for some time now, that Jamaica is on the cusp of achieving higher economic growth. It just has been continued to be elusive. If I was at the debate asking questions, that would have been one of my questions. What happened to 5 and 4? Why do we still not have the economic growth we've been craving? Lamore says the 3.5 won't be done in 1 year, but then again, it will be all done next year. I'm not sure I understand that comment. NutriFit says GCT is more burdensome. Customers actually pay 33% when they shop. Consumers pay the GCT for the manufacturers. Why is that 33% on NutriFit? Where does 33% come in? GCT is 15%. And don't forget as well that that was also rolled back by the JLP because it was 17.5% when they came into office. Lanesra says the finance minister is not good at debating, hence she never took the opportunity to take advantage of what Julian had said. If JLP win, I hope she's replaced as finance minister. There was a whole team. It wasn't just her, and nobody took that opportunity. Raquel says they still don't give me nothing near 300%. Shell says the rich paying for the poor to push out baby every 9 months. This is a global problem, which is why I have no problem with people hiding their money and not paying tax. Okay. Jason says if PNP wins the first program, they will cut. The first program they will cut is the road rehabilitation program. Why? What makes you say that, Jason? Day and Night says JLP is doing a good job so far. Jonathan says, I totally agree that we should eliminate income tax altogether. It's not fair, and it really puts a strain on everyone. Lower earners definitely deserve some relief. T says, if the party is doing well for 18 years, what's the problem? Well, if they're doing well, you vote them in again, right? But the problem is the fear of corruption and people stealing the people's money. So Kimar says, I think it's fine to pay 15% tax. The country has been growing over the last couple of years off taxpayers. How will the country grow if they move the threshold to $3.5 million? All right, let's leave it there. We have a lot more comments, but I want to keep your comments coming in the chat. Let's continue this discussion. Are you excited? Are you going to be voting in the election tomorrow? Here's our poll question. What is the biggest issue that you will be voting on in Jamaica's next general election? A, corruption. The PNP has made that a major political issue, harping on the finances of Prime Minister Andrew Holness, claiming that he is corrupt. So A, corruption. B, crime. C, taxes or other. Leave a comment, and there's so many other issues: healthcare, education, roads, many things that might be the one that sways you. What is the biggest issue that you will be voting on in Jamaica's general election tomorrow? Corruption, crime, taxes, or other? Leave a comment. Leave your answers in the chat. You can also take the poll over on the community tab of our channel, or on Twitter, or on tomorrow's email. Up next, we've got your market recap, and our analysts are standing by. Time now for your August market recap, brought to you by MyMoneyJA.com, the official data partner of Money Media. The JSE Combined Index gained 3% in August. That's about 11,000 points. 129 stocks traded across the main and junior markets. 56 made gains, 63 lost value, and 10 stayed the same. 517 million shares changed hands on the Jamaican dollar market, valued at $2.5 billion. Now let's see who had August's biggest gains. NCBFG climbed 35.5% to open September at $41.17. One Great Studio gained 30% to start the month at 43 cents. And Spurtree Spices was August's third biggest gainer. The stock gained 27% to start the month at $1.11. On the losing side now, Tropical Battery was last month's biggest loser. It's down 28.5% to open August at $1.38. Palace Amusement fell 25% to open the new month at 91 cents. And Fosrich was down 20% to open at $2.16. Over on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange, the composite index lost 7 points in August. That's about 1%. Massey was the most traded stock of the month. It opened September at $3.93 TT. Ansa Macau was the TTSE's biggest gainer, up 17%. It opened the new month at $43.97 TT. On the losing side, West Indies Tobacco was August's biggest loser, down 14%. Over in the U.S., the Dow Jones was up 4.5%, while the S&P 500 gained 3.5%, and the Nasdaq climbed nearly 4%. At the pumps in August, the price of 87 gas rose $1.22, while 90 gained $1.23. Meanwhile, the cost of regular diesel fell 78 cents, while low-sulfur diesel was down 85 cents. In foreign exchange trading, the Jamaican dollar gained 4 cents against the U.S. dollar in August, closing the month at an average $161.09 to 1 U.S. On the other hand, Jamaica's currency weakened against the Canadian and the pound. The Canadian dollar closed the month at $119.05 and $217.98 for the pound. The JMD lost $4.51 on the euro. Finally, on the crypto markets, Bitcoin prices were down 6% in the last 30 days, trading at $108,542 on Monday. Meanwhile, Ethereum prices were up 16%, trading at $4,280 on Monday. Market Recap was brought to you by MyMoneyJA, the official data partner of Money Media. Subscribe to my newsletter for money news like this straight to your inbox. Go to getmoneynews.com to sign up. The link is in my bio. Let's get this money. This segment of Taking Stock, The Analysts, is brought to you by Sagicor Investments. The views expressed in this segment are not necessarily the views of Money Media. This information is for educational purposes only and is not intended as financial advice. Please consult a licensed financial advisor before making any investment decisions. Welcome back. Joining us now for the analysts is Taking Stock analyst David Rose and Assistant VP at Sagicor Investments, Jodianne Arias. Welcome back, David and Jodianne.
Thanks, Kalila.
Thanks, everyone.
So we're starting with David this evening. We're talking about these two Trinidadian companies, Agostini and Angostura. They've been in the news a lot recently, and Agostini even bought a Jamaican company earlier this year. So tell us what their numbers are looking like.
So just to give context, they have not completed the acquisition as yet. So Agostini is currently in, the process phase of completing the acquisition of Massey Distribution Jamaica. So Massey Holdings Limited, listed on the JSE and TTSE, they are disposing of their interest in Massey Distribution Limited. However, there is a caveat because in this case, Massey Distribution has a healthcare distribution arm. Apart from its healthcare portfolio, its retail portfolio, it triggered a review by the Jamaican Fair Trade Commission, because just as a reminder, Agostini Limited acquired Health Brands Limited back in August 2023 and rebranded it to Aventa Jamaica Limited. So when there's an acquisition in the marketplace, the FTC, which is effectively like a watchdog, will evaluate to see if this acquisition, could distort market prices and also, impact consumers. So there has been a initial review. It's gone to the second stage now, and the companies in question, in this case being Massey and Agostini, are trying to find a solution that will give comfort to the Jamaican FTC. So it's not complete as yet. And that also brings me to their other acquisition, which in this case is of Prestige Holdings Limited. So those who know Prestige Holdings Limited is, we know Restaurants of Jamaica Limited here in Jamaica with KFC, Peace and so on as restaurant management companies. In Trinidad, there's a company called Prestige Holdings Limited that manages the KFC, Pizza Hut, Starbucks, TGI brands in Trinidad, and they also operate Starbucks in Guyana and TGI Fridays here in Jamaica. So mid-June, early July, we saw the, well, actually mid-June, we saw the announcement that Agostini intended to acquire the entire shareholding of Prestige Holdings Limited and paid for the deal via the issuance of new shares. Now, the company's most recent quarterly report, this being Agostini, they indicated that the deal was extended to September 3, and the reason being is that they are still waiting to receive approval from the Trinidad and Tobago Fair Trade Commission as well. So that's just to kind of show you that in context, despite, apologies, it's now September 9, apologies, not September 3. So just to give context that basically these two deals, are basically, at what we call a regulatory review phase, one in Jamaica, one in Trinidad, which impacts the closing or timing of the closing of these deals. So Massey Holdings Limited looking to consolidate and focus on more with specialized strengths, saying, hey, we're looking to dispose of Massey Distribution and, allow for, in this case, Caribbean Distribution Partners Limited, which has been renamed to Acado, which is Agostini's, joint venture with Goddard in Barbados to acquire Massey Distribution in Jamaica and expand the business. So just as a further bit of context, Agostini's subsidiary Acado, one of their manufacturing businesses, which was called Vemco before the recent rebranding, they manufacture a lot of products. So some of the ketchup we see in supermarkets, that's manufactured out of Trinidad and Tobago. Similarly for the mayonnaise and other brands as well. So that's, context with Agostini.
So has the foreign exchange issue been affecting these companies?
So it depends on which side of the coin you're looking at. So for almost every Trinidad company, the foreign exchange issue affects you in one way or the other. So Massey Distribution, Massey Holdings, said in Trinidad, FX issues is impacting their motors business. For Prestige Holdings, they don't discuss that as much. They've been pushing more and more into overseas acquisitions. They acquired Collins Limited based in Barbados a couple of years ago. That's a company that manufactures DPH, a couple of brands. They acquired a business in Curacao, Suriname recently. So they're not spoken as much about FX issues, but almost every other major Trinidad company has spoken about, FX constraints. So AS Bradden, for example, when they acquired CPJ, they've been taking advances from CPJ to get access to some USD as well to contend with their own constraints. But with respect to Agostini and, Massey, Agostini hasn't indicated any issues. Prestige mainly operated in Trinidad and Tobago. And for Massey, they are pushing more and more to achieve, I believe it is 70% or a particular target of 150% of their revenues coming out of Trinidad and Tobago, or distributing about, I think, 60 or 70% of their net profits in hard currency. So the beauty of the FX issues in Trinidad has forced companies to innovate and expand outside of their relative sphere of comfort.
Okay, so we've gone over Agostini. Let's look at, I keep getting these two companies confused.
Angostura.
The names are so similar. Agostini and Angostura, yes.
Straight vibes, Kalila. And that's actually a reference to the brand of liquor associated with Vibes Cartel.
Right.
So Angostura has had such a confusing period in recent times. So for those who don't know, Angostura is one of the Caribbean's rum production companies. So similarly to how we have Renifer here in Jamaica, you have Demerara in Guyana. Angostura, produces, their own brand of spirits. They have the bitters drinks in the supermarkets here in Jamaica as well. So their major shareholder, is the Trinidad state through their CLICO, shareholder that they manage in a sense. And with the recent change in government, we saw a situation back in June/July where the entire Angostura board resigned, which was quite an unfortunate thing to see, because in good corporate governance, you tend to kind of stagger the government appointments or change of board members, even a change administration. That entire, what I would call, wipeout of the board, had its impact, because in the case of Angostura, what they do is that they will declare a dividend, but they make a dividend, form part of a resolution at AGM to be paid at a later date. Because of the recent, development, with the entire board resigning, the company could not pay a dividend out to shareholders, and they recently had a new board appointment, through a special shareholder meeting, and Gary Hunt, a former government minister, was appointed as the new chairman. But it's quite interesting to see, considering that, we're having elections here in Jamaica, we're having elections in Guyana, Trinidad elections back in April, that, a change in government can cause such a level of disruption to the operations of a company, and in this case, its governance level. Because one thing to also note is that First Citizens Financial Group Holdings Limited, that's the company that owns First Citizens Investment Services, First Citizens Bank. That's major. That's the largest shareholder is government as well, 60% or 65%. The holding company that owns those shares just got a new board recently, and there is supposed to be a special meeting to appoint some of those directors to the First Citizens Financial Group board as well. So, as I mentioned, just those connections with Angostura into First Citizens to kind of show that with the recent election changes, there are consequences that can impact listed companies depending on, how, their share ownership is connected to the government in some capacity. But when it comes down to Angostura, otherwise they've had a pretty good, first half so far of 2025. Revenue is up, profit is up, but marginally up. Higher costs, especially with respect to tariffs, other costs in international markets. But when it comes down to the Street Labs brand, Richard Pandowi, who is the chairman of CPG, he's quite happy with the performance of the brand so far since they got it in late November/December. So, our cartels, release and return to the music landscape, and, his growth in his business ventures. It's, a positive spin-off for different companies, because Angostura makes the rum, it's shipped to Jamaica, CPJ distributes it, people enjoy it and drink it. He makes money, shareholders make money. It's just a perfect virtuous cycle.
Everybody happy. Well, thanks for those updates out of Trinidad, David. We need to move on to Jody. Jody, and tonight you are giving us an update on something of an internal matter, because there was a recent meeting to discuss the structure of Sagicor Select Funds, right? There is this court-appointed scheme arrangement meeting. So first, just explain what that is, court-appointed scheme arrangement meeting, and why do you need to do this?
All right, so I think the last time I was here where there was a request for an update of what's happening with the Select Fund. So we'd have made an announcement sometime last year to indicate that we are looking to change the structure of the funds from being a company that is listed on the stock exchange to move into a unit trust setup, so that you now be participating in a mutual fund instead of having shares listed on the market. The way in which it is that we went about that is what you call a scheme of arrangements, which means that you have to go through a court process. And what would have happened is that we'd have made a submission to the court indicating the issue or the problem that we'd have identified, and that we'd like to make a change in order to, give shareholders a solution that would be beneficial to them. And the court would have given us an approval to go ahead and have what they call a court-appointed meeting, which gave shareholders the opportunity to vote on the proposed scheme of arrangements, which is a shift to a unit trust setup. And so in long and short, that's basically it in terms of the court-appointed meeting. And it was initially, it may have been referenced as an extraordinary general meeting, but based on the correct legal term, it is a court-appointed meeting, which allows for shareholders to come in and vote on the proposal of a scheme of arrangement. And that scheme of arrangement points to the fact that we are recommending that there would be a shift from the current setup, which would then now have a unit trust setup. And the thinking behind this, or the driving factor around this, is the fact that when you look at the stock price relative to the net asset value for the stocks, there's a wide disparity.
Right.
So if you consider like Select F is trading probably at 45 cents, the NAV is over 50 cents. When you look at Select MD, that's even wider. We're thinking of a stock that's trading within 80 cents. I mean, it actually ran up post the meeting, but it typically trades around the 80 cents mark. But it's actually, in terms of net asset value, is over $1.20. And so there's value there that shareholders are not able to access. Shareholders are just missing out on. And a move to a unit trust would give that instant uptick in terms of the value of the units that shareholders will now have under a new arrangement, which would now make them unit holders. So instantly, what would be value for them is effectively that same $1.20.
Ah.
Instantly, they'd be moving up to that 50 cents. So you'd see that movement right away.
So then the funds would be delisted from the JSE?
Yeah. So that is the intention, that once it is that, so what happens now is that there is actually a return. The voting would have taken place, and we'd have seen where there was, they voted in favor, so shareholders voted in favor of the scheme. And there's actually now the process where we'd actually have to return to the courts and present what we'd have gotten in the court-appointed meeting. And we're expecting that the courts will give us approval to continue on this path. And we'd have to do applications to the FSC to register a unit trust. And once that is successful, we'll also do registration with the Companies Office for the new structure. And then once that is in place, we'd make that request to the Jamaica Stock Exchange to have the shares delisted.
So how would this impact, like, let's say I currently hold shares in Select F or Select MD. Is there anything I need to do, or everything is just handled behind the scenes?
Not at the initial. There's going to be a change, because currently you'd be a shareholder, and under this new system, you'd now become a Sagicor Investments client. So there will be a process that follows once it is that it takes effect, which is following from the court, and the court gives that go ahead, and there's an effective date. Once that takes place, there's an automatic transfer, because it's a court approved move. So it's not if you voted in favor, yes or no, everybody will be moved over once the court gives that appointment. But seeing that you would now become a Sagicor investment client, there are certain KYC documents and updates that you'd have to do in order for us to be compliant with the FSC, which would then mean that there will be some things that we may be requesting from shareholders.
Okay, so all right. So what is the timeline for implementation of this?
Well, because there are a few steps, so we'll go back to court, and then there's application to FSC, there's registration. The timeline that we're currently working to have all of this done is within the first quarter of 2026. But that's just the guesstimated timeline based on the estimates that we think each process would take.
So a couple of questions and comments online. NutriFit Life wants to know, what is the premium on the shares?
So currently, well, we just compare the stock price to the NAV. So if it is that you look at the net asset value for Select F, that is around a little over 50 cents. And if you look at the Select MD, that's about $1.20, a little over $1.20. So you could compare that to the current stock price and see what that premium would be, or what that difference is that you'll be able to unlock once there is a conversion.
So Roswell is pointing out that Select Fund IPO was $1. I remember both F and MD were $1. And he says those who had it until now lost. Long term, it didn't work out. But what you're saying, Jodianne, is that once it's converted to unit trust for MD, it would basically be worth $1.20.
Yes, correct.
So you gain long term, you gain once this change is made. Not so for F though.
Yeah, I mean there would be a gain, but not necessarily to the principal or the original that you would have entered into.
Okay.
So can I add a quick one, Kalila?
Yes, David.
So just to give some context to viewers, when you're a unit holder in a unit trust, most times you're able to redeem or sell your units at the NAV. So if the NAV of the fund, for example, let's say Select MD. Select MD's current NAV is 1.257. You would submit your request to the fund manager to redeem a unit. The fund manager goes through the process behind the scenes and pays you your cash. What currently takes place now is that the share price at 88 cents as the current closing price, and the best bid is around probably 86, 83 cents, which means that if you want to sell your shares, you'd have to sell at the 83, 84 cents or whatever price the best bid is at. So that's what Jody means in terms of that gain that would occur or could occur, in that new structure. So whereas in the current setup that you have to rely on someone else on the market willing to pay a higher price, hopefully to get a good exit. In the case of initial structure, you're getting to redeem at the net asset value price. Just one additional caveat to note, and this was mentioned in the document itself, the explanatory statement, there is an early exit fee 6 months post the unit trust launch date. What does that mean? If the NAV is $1 when the unit trust is launched and you exit on the same day, there'd be a 4% fee, which should likely mean you to get to 96 cents, as your payout. So that's just some context I'd like to add there quickly.
Thanks, David. Anything else you want to add before we leave, Jodianne?
I think just to point out that there is going to be, when you look at a unit trust, it's, as David pointed out, it will be open-ended. So therefore, persons can buy in on the NAV, and so new units will be created at that point. And if it is that person's buy or redeem, then those are cancelled at that point of redemption. So it is really for a way to allow for shareholders to really benefit from the actual value of the share itself, as opposed to the current context where it is that it's not trading as closely to the NAV as we'd like to see.
All right. Thanks, Jodianne. Thanks, David, for those explanations. Much appreciated as always.
You're welcome.
We'll take a final break and come back with your comments. This section of Taking Stock, The Analysts, was brought to you by Sagicor Investments. 12 months. That's all it takes to transform your finances with Money Mission Premium. For the next year, I'll guide you on the process to take your finances to the next level. You'll get my premium courses, monthly mentorship, and a great community of peers to help you on your journey. Go to moneymissionja.com. Let's get this money. Welcome back. Let's take those final comments. So Garth says the key is to have a strong opposition. Diplomat says he'll be voting on crime. Elvie says he'll be voting on corruption. Dayton says I'm voting for great leadership. Raquel says A, corruption. Jackie says taxes. Christopher says other, the economy. That's the issue that he's going to be voting on. A lot of comments here on what you are going to be voting on come tomorrow. Let me see what else we have or who else we have. Shells says the fact that people are cheering on people to fly down to vote shows how corrupt the people are. Most of the people not on any voting list. The politicians are a subset of the people. Both are rotten. NutriFit says Jamaicans need to be educated about cryptocurrency and invest because that's where the world is heading. Anne says, I feel if the JLP had a more transparent approach to explaining what they have accomplished, it would help the doubters. You don't think they were? I mean, they did a whole document with their list of, 100 achievements that the PM was out on the streets distributing. And continues, second, the government public relations department does not do a good job. That would be like JIS and PPCJ. Let's see. What else do we have? What other comments do we have? I think that's just about it for tonight. Those are the main ones. So thank you for tuning in yet another week. It has been my pleasure serving you, my pleasure being here. Guys, head on out to vote if you are registered to do so. Head on out to the polls tomorrow. Remember, your vote makes a difference. Yes, I am registered to vote, and I will be casting my vote tomorrow in Eastern St. Andrew constituencies where I am registered. So I'm going to go stand up in hot sun online and cast my vote because I do believe it makes a difference and your opinion matters. Every vote counts. When you don't vote, you allow other people to make the decision for you. So let your voice be heard. We will talk again next week, and quite possibly we'll be here discussing the results of this election and what lies ahead for Jamaica. Reminding you to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow, I'm going to be restocking the Money Mission workbook at Fontana. So I know it's been out of stock for a couple of weeks now. Part of the reason is that there have been roadworks, heavy roadworks, making the place that we keep the books, the inventory, inaccessible for like a couple weeks now. We've finally been able to access the location. And so now we can get the books out of storage and restock at Fontana. So hopefully by Friday, they will be available on the shelves again for those of you who've been asking. And also you have the option to buy online at Amazon.com. You can check the link in my bio or the link in the description to get your copy of the Money Mission workbook. Order it, get it shipped directly to your door. I'm Kalila Enriquez Reynolds. Thanks for watching. Thanks to our hardworking production team led by the lady Sachelle Williams, Alexa Roberts on the editing, Israel Ramsey managing the social media, and everybody who tuned in. See you again next week, guys. And remember, tell a friend that investing is the new sexy. So let's make it cool to talk about money. See you next week.